The Outpost 7 space station hung in the void like a rusted crown, home to 17 different species and exactly one human. Jackson Moore kept to himself in Bay 23, fixing broken ships with tools older than most civilizations and speaking to no one. The other residents called him the Silent One, though whether from respect or unease none could say. His neighbor in Bay 24 was Anna, a Drakari female whose scales shimmered like molten copper in the station's dim light. The Drakari were apex predators in every sense, warriors, conquerors, beings who measured worth in combat prowess and territorial dominance. Anna stood 7 feet tall, her elongated skull crowned with swept-back horns, her hands tipped with claws that could shred titanium plating. For 2 years they had existed in careful parallel. She would nod curtly when their paths crossed. He would nod back. Nothing more. The Drakari viewed most species as either prey or potential rivals. Humans with their soft skin and breakable bones firmly occupied the former category. Jackson was tightening a plasma coupling when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the mechanical symphony of the station. A wet, ragged breathing, a scraping of claws on metal grating. He found Anna collapsed against the bulkhead between their bays, purple blood pooling beneath her. 3 deep wounds crossed her torso, the kind made by Corinthian nerve blades. Her amber eyes, usually burning with predatory focus, were glazed with pain and shock. She looked up at him and he saw something he'd never expected to see in a Drakari's gaze: resignation. She was dying and she knew it. Her species' warrior code forbade asking for help. To do so would bring dishonor worse than death itself. Jackson didn't ask permission. He simply acted. He dragged her, all 300 pounds of scale and muscle, into his workshop. She didn't resist, too weak to protest, too proud to beg. He cleared his workbench with one sweep of his arm, tools clattering to the floor like metallic rain. The wounds were catastrophic. Nerve blades didn't just cut, they injected a paralytic toxin that shut down biological systems one by one. For a Drakari, death would come in hours. Their advanced physiology, ironically, made them more vulnerable to the toxin's specific molecular structure. Jackson's hands moved with the same precision he used on starship engines. He had no medical training, no xenobiology degree. What he had was an intimate understanding of systems, of how things worked, of how to make broken things whole again. He flushed the wounds with industrial solvent that would have killed most species, but merely burned away contaminated tissue in Drakari physiology. He used a plasma torch on its lowest setting to cauterize the deepest cuts, the smell of seared scales filling the bay. When his medical adhesive proved incompatible with her biology, he improvised with hull sealant and carbon fiber mesh. Anna watched him through waves of agony, unable to speak, unable to understand why this small, soft creature was trying to save her. Humans were weak. Humans were prey. This was not how the universe worked. But Jackson worked through the night. When the nerve toxin began shutting down her respiratory system, he rigged a ventilator from an oxygen recycler and forced air into her lungs. When her triple-chambered heart started to fail, he applied rhythmic pressure to her chest with a hydraulic press set to pulse at precise intervals, manually pumping blood through her massive frame. 18 hours. That's how long it took. When Anna's eyes finally cleared, when her breathing steadied, when her claws flexed with returning strength, she stared at the human standing before her, this impossibly fragile being who had pulled her back from the void through sheer stubborn refusal to let her die. "Why?" she rasped in the station's common tongue. It was the first word she'd ever spoken to him. Jackson shrugged, wiping purple blood from his hands with an oil rag. "You're my neighbor." 3 days later, representatives from the Galactic Council arrived at Outpost 7, summoned by a formal petition that sent shockwaves through the diplomatic corps. Anna, daughter of the Drakari War Chief Supreme, had invoked the ancient right of life debt, a bond so sacred in Drakari culture that it superseded all other laws, all other obligations. But she hadn't just declared herself bound to Jackson. She had demanded something unprecedented: that humanity be granted full council membership, that they be recognized not as a minor species, but as equals among the galactic community. The council representatives, beings of energy, hive minds, and crystalline intelligence, gathered in the station's assembly hall. This was impossible. Humanity had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. They had no great weapons, no vast empire, no proof of their worthiness. Anna stood before them, Jackson silent at her side. You measure species by their strength in war, she said, her voice carrying the weight of her bloodline's authority. By their fleets, their weapons, their willingness to dominate. By these measures, humanity appears weak. She turned, placing one clawed hand on Jackson's shoulder, a gesture that made several council members recoil in shock. No Drakari touched lesser species with anything resembling respect, but strength is not only found in the capacity to destroy. This human saved my life using nothing but tools, determination, and a refusal to abandon someone in need. He did not calculate odds or seek reward. He simply acted because it was right. I have conquered 17 worlds. I have killed champions from a dozen species. But I could not have done what he did. I would not have even tried. She looked back at the council, her eyes blazing with conviction. If you measure worth by the willingness to preserve life rather than take it, by the ingenuity to solve impossible problems, by the courage to help even when every rational calculation says to walk away, then humanity may be the strongest species in this galaxy. We have been measuring the wrong things. The council deliberated for 3 days. Some argued against Anna's logic. Some called her honor-bound and therefore compromised. But in the end, the evidence was undeniable. A human with no training, no advanced technology, nothing but improvisation and will had accomplished what most species' best medical facilities could not. The vote passed. Humanity received its seat at the Galactic Council. Jackson returned to Bay 23 to his tools and his solitude. But now when he worked on ships in the quiet hours, he could hear Anna in the next bay, and sometimes she would bring him coffee. Real Earth coffee, shipped across light years at devastating expense. They rarely spoke. They didn't need to. The universe had learned what they already knew. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the most profound truths, and sometimes strength looks nothing like what you expect. The Dragon Lady and the Silent Mechanic, neighbors in the infinite dark, had changed the galaxy without ever meaning to. They had simply done what humans do best, looked at an impossible situation and decided that impossible was just another problem to solve. And in the cold mathematics of the cosmos, that made all the difference.